Some rules exist for reasons you'll never understand until it's too late. What happened to Sam at Cedar Grove Hospital's morgue that night proved that sometimes the dead don't whisper just to be heard. They whisper because they have something urgent to say. Sam had always been comfortable around death. It was a practical necessity for someone pursuing a career in forensic pathology. The night shift at Cedar Grove Hospital's morgue seemed like the perfect opportunity to gain experience while earning extra money from medical school. The morgue was located in the hospital's basement, accessible only through a service elevator that required a special key card. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a harsh, clinical white glow. Stainless steel tables lined the center of the room, while refrigerated drawers occupied the entire back wall. The older man said, "But I've been working in this morgue for 15 years. Trust me on this one, Sam. Just ignore any voices you might hear." The pay was decent, the hours fit his schedule, and how hard could it be to watch over a few quiet bodies? The morgue was eerily quiet, save for the constant hum of refrigeration units and the occasional distant sound of footsteps from the floors above. He had 3 bodies to process that night: an elderly woman who had died of natural causes, a middle-aged man who had suffered a heart attack, and a young woman named Rebecca Chen, who had been brought in after a car accident. Dr. Martinez, chief medical examiner, gave Sam a brief tour on his first evening. The silence was actually peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of the hospital floors above. "The work is straightforward," Dr. Martinez explained, his voice echoing slightly in the sterile space. The whisper came a third time, and now Sam could tell it was coming from the direction of the refrigerated drawers. She had been brought in that afternoon, and her paperwork indicated she was only 26 years old. The voice seemed to be coming from drawer number 7, which, according to his records, should have been empty. His hand trembled as he reached for the handle. Dr. Martinez's rule didn't seem to apply to this situation, but the whisper continued, now seeming to come from right beside his ear. Sam's rational mind tried to find an explanation. Maybe it was someone upstairs looking for the body, but the voice was too close, too intimate to be coming from another floor. As Sam carefully documented her personal effects, he couldn't help but feel a profound sadness. It was coming from the table where Rebecca Chan's body lay. The morgue looked exactly as it had before, but something felt fundamentally wrong. But as he typed, he became aware of another sound, a soft, scratching noise that seemed to be coming from inside one of the examination tables. The K temperature seemed to have dropped several degrees, and the fluorescent lights overhead flickered intermittently. The white sheet covering Rebecca's body was moving. Not as if something was trying to get out, but as if something was trying to get in. Something was clawing at the metal, trying to reach the body above. He stumbled through the darkness, crashed into tables and equipment, but somehow found his jacket and keycard. The elevator seemed to take forever to arrive, and when it finally did, he could hear something moving in the darkness behind him. Multiple somethings, all converging on his location. The security footage from that night showed Sam working normally until 2:47 a.m. When all the cameras mysteriously malfunctioned, they remained offline for exactly 43 minutes. He glanced around, but the morgue was empty except for him and the bodies. The whisper came again, slightly louder this time. She had been so young, with her whole life ahead of her. "You'll be cataloging personal effects, updating records, and occasionally preparing bodies for transport. Nothing too complicated for someone with your background." But the scratches underneath the examination table were real, and they were deep enough to gouge the metal. But sometimes, late at night, he still hears whispers calling names, not his own, but the names of people he's never met, people who might still be waiting in the dark for someone to answer. As they walked between the examination tables, Dr. Martinez's expression grew more serious. "There is one thing, though. One rule that's absolutely non-negotiable." He stopped walking and turned to face Sam directly. "If you hear someone whispering your name down here, you ignore it completely. The elevator required a key card, and his was back in his jacket pocket across the room. As he turned to retrieve it, every light in the morgue went out simultaneously. Don't respond. Don't look around. Don't acknowledge it at all. The spirits of the dead get lonely, especially at night. They'll try to get your attention, but engaging with them only makes things worse. Sam nodded, though he couldn't hide his skepticism. He'd never been particularly superstitious, and the idea of chatty ghosts seemed more silly than scary. Dr. Martinez seemed to sense his doubt. I know how it sounds. After Dr. Martinez left, Sam settled into his routine. The first few hours passed uneventfully. Sam updated files, organized personal belongings, and familiarized himself with the facility's computer system. It was around 2 a.m. when Sam began working on Rebecca Chen's case. He was updating her file on the computer when he heard it. A soft whisper that seemed to come from somewhere behind him, but it wasn't his name being called. Rebecca Chen, ... Sam's fingers froze over the keyboard, but the voice was clear, distinctly human, and undeniably present in the room with him. Rebecca Chen, ... Where is Rebecca Chen? A chill ran down Sam's spine. This wasn't his name being whispered. Tit was the name of the patient he was currently working on. He stood slowly, his heart beginning to race. Rebecca Chen, ... Rebecca Chen, ... Sam approached the wall of morgue drawers, his footsteps echoing in the silent room. The drawer slid open with a soft pneumatic hiss, revealing nothing but empty stainless steel. Rebecca Chen is not alone. She's not alone. Sam spun around, his breath coming in short gasps. He hurried back to the computer, desperate to finish Rebecca's file and move on to something else. Scratching grew louder, more insistent. Sam's hands shook as he tried to focus on the screen, but the sound was impossible to ignore. She's not alone. The voice whispered again, closer now. She brought something back with her. Sam's blood ran cold. He forced himself to look at the examination table, and what he saw made his stomach lurch. The scratching sound intensified, and Sam realized with growing horror that it was coming from underneath the table. He grabbed the phone to call Dr. Martinez, but the line was dead. In the complete darkness, the whisper came one final time. But now it was directly behind him, breathing the words against his neck. Rebecca Chen. She brought us all back with her. And now we're awake. Sam ran. The elevator doors closed just as Sam heard the first body hit the floor. When Dr. Martinez arrived the next morning, he found Sam's resignation letter on his desk. Rebecca Chen's body was found on the floor, exactly where Sam had left it. Sam never returned to Cedar Grove Hospital. He switched his major to accounting and moved to a different state. But sometimes, late at night, he still hears whispers calling names, not his own, but the names of people he's never met, people who might still be waiting in the dark for someone to answer. The last thing Tyler remembers clearly is the GPS's voice changing from mechanical to desperate, begging him to run. Everything after that is just fragments of terror and the sound of something breathing in the darkness behind him. He worked in IT, fixed problems with logic, and didn't believe in anything that couldn't be explained by code or common sense. So when his GPS started acting up on that foggy October evening, he initially brushed it off as a software glitch. Tyler had always prided himself on being a practical guy. The familiar route should have been a straight shot down Highway 34. But when he glanced at his phone, mounted on the dashboard, the blue line on the map had changed. Instead of the main road, it was directing him down a narrow dirt path he'd never noticed before. He was driving home from a client meeting in the mountains, taking the winding back road he'd traveled dozens of times before. Recalculating, the GPS announced in its standard female voice, "Turn right in 200 feet for the fastest route home." Behind him, where the dirt road should have been, there was nothing but solid forest. No signal. The GPS screen still showed the blue line extending ahead, but behind his current position, the map was completely blank. pine trees stood so close together that not even a hiking trail could have passed between them, let alone a car. It was as if the road had sealed itself behind him. Tyler frowned. He'd used this same GPS app for years, and it had never suggested this route before. Whatever you do, don't stop the car. He knows you're here now. The dirt road looked barely wide enough for his sedan, disappearing into a thick wall of pine trees shrouded in mist. The rear of his car bumped against something solid, bark and branches that shouldn't have been there. Tyler whispered to the empty car, feeling ridiculous for talking to his GPS. The alternative, that he was losing his mind, felt even worse, but the device insisted it would save him 20 minutes, and he was already running late for dinner with his girlfriend Sarah. The GPS had never used his name before. It wasn't connected to any accounts that would have his personal information, continuity sounding increasingly frantic. In 1 mile, you'll see a small clearing on your right, something tall and pale that seemed to glide between the trees, keeping pace with his car effortlessly. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Stop the car there, get out, and run into the woods. Don't look back. The fog seemed to thicken around his car, and the familiar sounds of distant traffic vanished completely. I've been trying to lead people away from it, but it's getting smarter. It's learning to use the technology against us. The dirt road was rougher than it had appeared, jarring his car with every pothole and root. Pine branches scraped against his windows with fingernail-like scratches. The GPS screamed, its voice now purely human, terrified. Behind him, he heard his car's engine rev on its own, the vehicle lurching forward to crash into a tree. The message is always the same. Thank you for listening. But it's still out there, and it's learning. Be careful who you trust to guide you home. Connection lost. Connection lost. The headlights flickered and died, plunging the woods into absolute darkness. Run now. I can't hold the connection much longer. Tyler slammed on the brakes, his car sliding to a stop in the loose dirt. Behind him, the pale figure was getting closer, and Tyler could make out impossible details. Too many joints in its arms, its eyes that reflected his headlights like an animal's. Against his better judgment, Tyler turned onto the narrow path. The car crept forward along the dirt road, deeper into the forest. The fog grew thicker, and strange sounds began filtering through the silence, branches snapping in the distance. Something large moving through the underbrush parallel to the road. His sedan wasn't designed for this terrain, and the car shuddered with each bump and rut. His car was never found. The dirt road didn't exist on any map, and the police dismissed his story as a result of exhaustion and stress. Instead, it began counting down. He'll be here in 10 minutes, maybe less. You need to keep moving. The moment his tires left the asphalt, something felt wrong. The dirt road seemed to stretch endlessly ahead, swallowed by fog and darkness. He's getting closer. Can see him on the thermal sensors. Tyler's headlights barely penetrated the gloom, creating a small bubble of visibility that made the surrounding forest feel impossibly vast and hostile. Continue straight for 3.2 miles, the GPS instructed, but Tyler noticed the voice sounded different somehow, less robotic, more urgent. He drove for what felt like much longer than 3.2 miles, but the GPS never announced the next turn. When he finally decided to turn around, Tyler discovered something that made his blood run cold. What the hell? Colin muttered, throwing the car in park and grabbing his phone. He tried to back up anyway, but his reverse lights illuminated only an impenetrable wall of trees. Continue straight, the GPS said, and Tyler's skin crawled. The voice was definitely different now. Less mechanical, more ... human. Tyler's hands shook as he stared at the device. Don't stop. Who knows I'm here? The device didn't answer. Tyler's foot found the accelerator. He didn't understand what was happening, but every instinct screamed at him to listen to the voice. It's faster, the GPS urged, and now Tyler could hear genuine panic in the voice. "What thermal sensors?" Tyler asked, pressing harder on the gas pedal. "I'm not just a GPS, Tyler. I'm trying to help you. You need to listen to me." Exactly. Through his rearview mirror, Tyler caught a glimpse of something moving behind him. "What is that thing?" he whispered. "Something that's been hunting these woods for decades." The clearing appeared in his headlights exactly as the GPS had predicted. "Run!" Tyler threw open his door and sprinted into the forest. He ran blindly through the trees, branches tearing at his clothes, his phone's GPS app repeating the same message over and over. Connection lost. When the sun finally rose, Tyler found himself on the edge of Highway 34, bloody and exhausted. But sometimes, late at night, Tyler's phone buzzes with a notification from his GPS app. Tyler doesn't drive alone anymore, and he never, ever follows GPS directions down roads he doesn't recognize. Because sometimes, the things trying to help you are just as lost as you are. Some signals were never meant to be received, and some windows should never be opened into rooms that don't exist. Beatrice had always been a light sleeper, but since bringing Little home from the hospital 3 months ago, she'd become hypervigilant about every sound, every shadow, every breath that came through the baby monitor's crackling speaker. The device itself was nothing special, a basic model with a grainy, black and white screen that her mother-in-law had bought from a discount electronics store. For a moment, the image wavered, and she caught a glimpse of something else. Another crib, in what looked like a different room entirely, hadn't moved. Keys shrugged it off as a technical glitch, the kind of thing that happened with cheap electronics. The walls appeared cracked and water-stained, and the crib itself seemed older, its paint peeling in long, sad strips. But it did the job, or so she thought. The interference started on a Tuesday night in October. Beatrice was washing dishes when the monitor's screen flickered, static lines dancing across peacefully sleeping form. She'd begun to anticipate the static, to watch for those brief glimpses into the other room. There was something compelling about it, like peering through a keyhole into a world that existed parallel to her own. A woman's voice, singing a lullaby that Beatrice didn't recognize. The melody was haunting, beautiful in its sadness, and it seemed to drift from that other room, the one with the cracked walls and peeling paint. Beatrice leaned closer to the monitor, straining to hear more, but the interference faded, and she was looking at again, still fast asleep. Beatrice mentioned it to her husband, Carlos, but he was working double shifts at the factory and barely had the energy to grunt in response. She'd dim the lights in the kitchen and sit at the table with a cup of tea, watching the monitor screen. When the static began, she'd hold her breath and listen. The other room never seemed to change. Same cracked walls, same bare bulb, same old crib with its mysterious occupant. "Just buy a new one," he'd mumbled before rolling over and falling asleep. Sometimes she could see a shadow moving just beyond the camera's range, and she imagined it was the woman who sang the lullabies, pacing back and forth beside the crib. Not just any name with the accent mark that Carlos insisted on, the way his grandmother had spelled it. The other baby was still staring at the camera, Hank, and now it was smiling. A toothless, innocent smile that somehow made everything worse. She tapped the side of the monitor, and the image snapped back to normal, but it didn't. The screen remained clear, showing only peaceful form in her familiar nursery. Then the screen flickered back to normal and was sleeping as if nothing had happened. The voice always sounded the same, distant, melancholy, tinged with an emotion that might have been longing or might have been despair. Beatrice was watching the monitor when the static began, and this time the image was clearer than it had ever been. But when the static began, something different happened. The image flickered between the two rooms rapidly, as if the signal was getting crossed, overlaying one view onto the other. The screen showed only nursery, but her daughter remained sitting up, looking directly at the camera with those wide, dark eyes. And then, as Beatrice watched in frozen terror, raised her tiny hand and waved. Even now, 3 days later, she can't unshake the feeling that the connection has been severed. That somewhere in the static between signals that other rooms still exists, and the woman with the reedy voice is still singing her lullabies. For a terrifying moment, Beatrice could see both babies at once in her modern nursery. It was the wave of someone who understood they were being watched, someone who was waving back at another presence that only she could see. She dropped her phone, and it clattered to the floor as she stared at the monitor in horror. The image was still flickering between the two rooms, but now she could see movement in both. In the other room, the woman's shadow was moving closer to the camera. In room, her own daughter was stirring, sitting up in her crib with the unnatural stillness of a child who had been awakened by something beyond her understanding. And the other child, in its decaying room, both staring at the camera with the same expression of innocent curiosity. She could see the child in the other crib, a baby, maybe 6 months old, with dark hair and pale skin. The baby was awake, staring directly at the camera with wide, unblinking eyes. But it happened again the next night. And the night after that. Each time, the other room became clearer. It was definitely not nursery. The walls were a sickly green color, and there was a single, bare bulb hanging from the ceiling that cast harsh shadows across everything. The crib in this other room was occupied too, though Beatrice could never quite make out the child inside. Just a small, still form beneath a threadbare blanket. Each time, the interference lasted a few seconds longer. By the weekend, the interference was occurring multiple times per night, but Beatrice found herself oddly reluctant to replace the monitor. On Sunday night, she heard the voice for the first time. It came through the speaker as a whisper, barely audible beneath the electronic hum. Mi, Nino, mi sol. The Spanish words were familiar, but the voice was not. It was thin, reedy, like someone speaking through water. The lullabies became a nightly occurrence. Sometimes they were in Spanish, sometimes in English, and occasionally in a language Beatrice couldn't identify. Beatrice started staying up later, waiting for the interference, but she began to notice details. There was a rocking chair in the corner, moving slightly, as if someone had just stood up from it. The breakthrough came on a Thursday night, 2 weeks after the interference had started, and the voice came again, closer this time, as if the woman was speaking directly into the microphone. The voice whispered, "Mi, amor." Beatrice's blood turned to ice. The voice had said her daughter's name. She looked at her own baby, sleeping peacefully in the real nursery. Then, back at the monitor, the interference continued for another minute. Long enough for Beatrice to see the woman's hand reach into frame, long pale fingers brushing the other baby's cheek. Beatrice didn't sleep that night. She sat in the kitchen with all the lights on, watching the monitor and waiting for the static to return. The next night, she was ready with her phone, determined to record the interference. And then the voice came again, clearer than ever before. "Beatrice," it whispered. "Beatrice, can you see me?" This time, Beatrice was certain. The voice was addressing her directly. Turned toward the camera, and in that moment, the interference stopped. The gesture was too deliberate, too knowing for a 3-month-old baby. Beatrice unplugged the monitor immediately, but the damage was done. And sometimes, late at night, she swears she can still hear them drifting through the walls. And with that final story, we pull back from the abyss. For now, tales of ordinary lives brushing against the extraordinary, the terrifying, the unexplainable, from the shadow that mimics to the voice that calls from an empty house. We've seen tonight how thin the veil between our reality and a much darker one can be. These stories are not just fiction. They are born from real experiences, whispered in hushed tones, and shared to remind us that we are not always alone. And that's the most chilling thought, isn't it? Perhaps one of tonight's stories reminded you of something that happened to you, or to someone you know. A strange occurrence you've tried to forget, A noise in the night you rationalized away. A figure you saw for just a second. The details of your own brush with the darkness are what give this channel life. I invite you to leave your own story in the comments below. Let us know what you've seen in the shadows. If these stories sent a shiver down your spine, show your support by hitting that like button. It helps these tales reach others who need a reminder to check their locks at night. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell. We have so many more stories to share, and you won't want to be left in the dark. Until next time, remember that you are not afraid of being alone. You are afraid of the bone-deep certainty that you are not.